If you've watched my 11th edition goals video, you already know that Death Guard is one of my next armies. And making that decision meant spending a lot of time looking at every single Chaos faction and figuring out which one was right for me. So today we're covering every Chaos army in Warhammer 40k. Who they are, how they play, and whether you should collect them. This is part 3 of my faction series. Part 1 covered the Imperium, Part 2 covered the Space Marine chapters, and Part 4 will be the Xenos. I'm looking forward to that one. And the timing on this couldn't be better. All 7 Chaos factions have dropped for 11th edition with 21 brand new detachments across every Heretic army. So everything we're talking about today is as up to date as it can be for the new edition. Chaos is the most varied Grand Alliance in the game. 7 completely different armies that share almost nothing except corruption and the hatred of the Imperium. Whatever kind of player you are, there's a Chaos army for you, so let's run through all of them. Let's start with the broadest Chaos faction, the Chaos Space Marines, or as the lore calls them, the Heretic Astartes. These are the Space Marines who've turned away from the Emperor during the Horus Heresy, and have been fighting a guerrilla warfare against the Imperium ever since. Unlike the god-specific legions that we'll cover in a moment, the Chaos Space Marines can dedicate themselves to any Chaos god or none at all. They're the most flexible Chaos faction in the game, a toolbox army that can be built in 100 different directions depending on what you want to do. On the table, Chaos Space Marines have access to a huge variety of units. Chosen, Cultists, Defilers, Havocs, Obliterators. The range covers everything from an elite infantry to heavy support to demon engines. That flexibility is both their greatest strength and their biggest challenge, because figuring out which direction to build your list requires a lot of knowledge on that faction. Defilers, which are a huge part of competitive Space Marine lists at the end of 10th edition, took some significant points increases going into 11th. So the meta is shifting, but the core of the army remains incredibly versatile, and there are 3 new 11th edition detachments to explore. If you want to collect Chaos Space Marines, but none of the god-specific legions appeal to you, Chaos Space Marines gives you the freedom to build whatever you want within the Chaos aesthetic. They're best for players who love flexibility, want to collect across a whole range of Chaos, and enjoy building creative list combinations. Death Guard. Potentially one of my next armies. I'm absolutely biased here. The Death Guard are the Plague Marines of Nurgle, the Chaos God of Disease and Decay. Once they were a proud legion of Space Marines. Now they're bloated, rotting, and utterly unkillable warriors who spread disease and despair across every world they touch. Their Primarch Mortarion leads them, a towering demon Primarch who is one of the most impressive models in the entire Chaos range. Here's the thing about Death Guard that I think gets overlooked. The whole Nurgle aesthetic, the decay, the corruption, the rot, it sounds grim, and it is, but there's also a dark humor to it. Nurgle is actually the most jovial of the Chaos Gods. His followers are disgusting and diseased, but they also are strangely content. There's a weird joy to this faction that makes them unlike anything else in Chaos. On the table, Death Guard are exactly what they look like. Slow, tough, and impossible to remove. Feel no pains, high toughness, disgustingly resilient. You're not going to kill them quickly. And every turn they're alive, they're spreading contagion and doing damage just by existing. They're the definition of a durable attrition army, and that is exactly why I chose them. And the painting? I was terrified of it initially, but then I realized Death Guard are supposed to look decayed. They're supposed to look dirty and corrupted, a wash, some dry brushing, a bit of rust and grime, and your mistakes don't just look acceptable, they almost look intentional. It's a bit more forgiving than you think for a paint scheme, especially when compared to other Chaos factions where the trim has to be pristine. Death Guard are best for players who love that durable attrition playstyle, that Nurgle aesthetic, and an army that punishes opponents for ignoring it. World Eaters, the Berserkers of Khorne. And the pitch for this army is the simplest in the entire game. Run at the enemy, hit them again, and then keep hitting them until everything is dead. That's it. That's World Eaters. The Legion were once the Emperor's shock troops, masters of brutal close combat assault. After the Horus Heresy and the influence of Khorne, the Chaos God of violence and bloodshed, they became something more terrifying. Berserkers consumed by an endless bloodlust, caring nothing for tactics or strategy, only the next kill. Their Primarch, Angron, is one of the most tragic figures in 40k lore, and one of the most spectacular models in the Chaos range. A massive demon Primarch covered in rage and blood, he looks exactly like what he is, the most dangerous thing on the table. Speaking of, on the table, World Eaters are a pure melee army. Everything is built around getting into close combat as fast as possible and destroying whatever they touch. With 11th edition buffing melee across the board with a 2-inch engagement range, World Eaters are incredibly well positioned. They do one thing, but they do it better than almost anyone else in the game. Personally, I find the all-in melee commitment a little limiting for a full edition, but if you want an army that is completely unambiguous about what it does, and you love the blood-soaked berserker aesthetic, World Eaters deliver that completely. They're best for players who love that pure melee aggression, simple but punishing playstyles, and the Khorne aesthetic. Thousand Sons. And visually, this might be one of the most beautiful armies. The Thousand Sons were once brilliant scholars and powerful psychers who sought forbidden knowledge and paid a terrible price for it. Their bodies crumble to dust, leaving only animated suits of armor filled with the remnants of their souls. They serve Tzeentch, the chaos god of change and sorcery. Their Primarch Magnus the Red, a demon sorcerer of immense power, leads what remains of their shattered legion. That blue and gold color scheme is absolutely iconic. It's clean, striking, and it gives kind of Egyptian vibes. If you want an army that looks spectacular on the shelf, Thousand Sons are right up there. On the table, Thousand Sons are a psychic shooting heavy army. Where World Eaters smash into everything in melee, Thousand Sons blast their enemies apart with arcane power from range. Their Rubric Marines, the animated suits of armor, are extremely durable infantry that are surprisingly hard to shift, and their sorcerers provide layered buffs and abilities that reward patient, tactical play. Thousand Sons were on my short list before I landed on Death Guard. The aesthetic pulled at me hard. What held me back was uncertainty about how psychic mechanics would translate into 11th edition. If that appeals to you though, and you're willing to do the research, Thousand Sons are a deeply rewarding faction with one of the best model ranges in the game. They're best for players who love that psychic mechanic, beautiful models, shooting heavy armies, and a technical rewarding playstyle. Emperor's Children. Lucius the Eternal made my top 10 models list of 10th edition. Fulgrim, the Demon Primarch of Slaanesh, also made my top 10 models list. These are two of my favorite models in the entire game, and they both belong to Emperor's Children. The Emperor's Children were once the most refined, most beautiful, most perfectionist of all the Space Marine legions. After the Horus Heresy and their fall to Slaanesh, the chaos god of excess and sensation, they became something entirely different. Warriors who seek perfection through excess. The most intense experiences, the most extreme sensations, the finest pleasures, and the most exquisite pain. It's decadent, theatrical, and unlike anything else. On the table, Emperor's Children are a fast, melee, and shooting hybrid army with a strong emphasis on psychic disruption and sonic weapons. Their new 11th edition rules lean into that Slaanesh speed theme, getting into combat quickly and overwhelming the opponent before they can react. Emperor's Children was the last army I considered before landing on Death Guard. And if Fulgrim and Lucius are calling you the same way they called me, this is an army worth considering. The model range is spectacular and only going to grow with the new edition. PC is best for players who love speed and that melee shooting hybrid, theatrical aesthetic, and some of the best individual character models in the game. I absolutely love this faction. Chaos Demons. Where every other Chaos faction is built around corrupted mortals or fallen Space Marines, Chaos Demons are the literal manifestation of the Chaos Gods themselves. Bloodletters of Khorne, Plague Bearers of Nurgle, Demonettes of Slaanesh, and the Horrors of Tzeentch. These are beings that exist in the warp and pour into reality to consume and corrupt everything they touch. They're not warriors who chose chaos, they are chaos, given physical form. On the table, the Chaos Demons are a unique faction. They can be run as a standalone army covering all 4 Chaos Gods, or elements of them can be allied to God-specific legions. A Death Guard player can bring Plague Bearers as allies. A World Eaters player can add Bloodletters. That cross-faction flexibility makes demons super useful even if you're not planning to run them as your primary army. They're also a fantastic army if you're interested in playing Age of Sigmar and Old World. They kind of add into a little bit of everything, so they're great that way. Their new 11th edition faction pack brought 3 new detachments, including Cavalcade of Chaos, Lords of the Warp, and Warptide, alongside the premium Demonic Incursion detachment. So there's a lot of new content to dig in here. Chaos Demons are a faction that I know kind of the least about as an individual army, but I've seen them on the table attached to various types, like adding those Plague Bearers to Nurgle or Bloodletters to World Eaters. And every time you see somebody use them, it looks awesome. They're a fantastic looking army, so I highly recommend if you're interested, please get into them. But they're worth researching further. They're best for players who love that purest expression of chaos and want that cross-faction flexibility, and enjoy mixed god armies. And finally, Chaos Knights, the dark mirror of the Imperial Knights. And if you watched my 11th edition goals video, you might remember I called these my wildcard army, where Imperial Knights are noble households pledged to the Imperium. Chaos Knights are those same households that fell to chaos. Corrupted war machines now bound to the dark gods and pillaging across the galaxy in service of their new masters. The models are spectacular, twisted versions of their Imperial counterparts with demonic features, corrupted armor, and menacing aesthetic. On the table, Chaos Knights play similar to the Imperial Knights, a smaller number of enormous models, each one a centerpiece, each one hitting like a freight train. You're not bringing bodies to the fight, you're bringing nightmares. Their new 11th edition detachments include Bastions of Tyranny, Hunting Warpack, and Iconoclast Fiefdom, with the premium Infernal Lance remaining at a 3 DP for the full Knight experience list. I called them my wildcard because if I ever find a genuinely good deal on Chaos Knights, I reserve the right to start collecting them. The model count is low, the visual impact is enormous, and their corruption aesthetic fits perfectly. So I'm not going to rule them out. And they're best for players who want a low model count with maximum visual impact and a corrupted mechanical aesthetic that pairs well with other Chaos armies. Now, one little caveat at the end here is they rely a lot on Battle Shock, and in 10th edition, Battle Shock was barely a thing. In 11th, they've changed the rules around Battle Shock, so we'll see how that actually plays out, but until I play a few games with it, I don't want to make any promises. So, that's every Chaos army in Warhammer 40k. Chaos Space Marines for flexibility, Death Guard for durability, World Eaters for that pure melee aggression, Thousand Suns for psychic power, and Emperor's Children for that speed and excess. Chaos Demons for the purest chaos experience, and Chaos Knights for that corrupted mechanical nightmare. 7 completely different armies that share almost nothing except corruption. That variety is one of the best things about the Chaos faction. Whatever kind of player you are, there's something here for you. For me personally, Death Guard is slow and tough and almost unkillable, exactly what I was looking for. That build will potentially start soon, or maybe the Chaos Knights, and I'll be documenting every step of it on the channel. Part 4 is going to be Xenos, which I'm very excited about. Subscribe so you don't miss them either. Drop a comment and let me know which Chaos army is your pick and why. I read every single one, and we'll see you in the next one.